Even more injury news for Montreal, as Sean Monahan and Alex Belzile are the most recent Habs to be ruled out for the season in what feels like just record-breaking numbers. We'll be talking about that, plus who could maybe fill their roles. Maybe some guys from Laval could come up and prove themselves in the last few games of the season, and some awesome news to end off the video as Cole Caufield is seen back on the ice at practice, so you won't want to miss this edition of Habs Digest. Hello, bonjour, ahoy, and welcome to today's news edition of Habs Digest. I'm your host, Josh Gosse, alongside my co-host, Jesse Poirier. And before we get into the video, as always, we're well past 4,500 subscribers now. You guys have been loving our videos recently, but if you haven't hit that subscribe button, do it now. Help us hit 5,000. It's an incredible milestone, and we'd really appreciate if you guys could help us reach it. Jesse, it just feels like every single day we're just going further and further into this tunnel of despair and sadness. As Alex Belzile and Sean Monahan are now officially out for the season. We got a tweet here from Eric Engels. Belzile and Monahan are the 8th and 9th Canadiens players to have their seasons ended prematurely. This is just season-ending injuries, by the way, right? Not to mention the other guys. The other 7 are David Savard, Caden Guhle, Arber, Xhekaj, Cole Caufield, Juraj Slafkovsky, Josh Anderson, Christian Dvorak, plus, as one Reddit user, Deuce Abe mentions, add to that Evans missed 28 games, Edmundson 21, Matheson 34, Drouin 24, Gallagher 34, Evans, RHP, Allen, and Harris aren't practicing, and Dach is still randomly missing, and he's missed 19 games, but is still somehow second on the team in points. Jesse, I don't even know what to say anymore. I just sped through all that, but at this point, we've mentioned this health and conditioning staff so many times, but I think we've maybe finally hit a tipping point when it comes to talking about completely revamping it.
Absolutely. Definitely no surprise in Sean Monahan being out, even though we've loved him so far this year. I think as Habs fans, we kind of gave up hope a long time ago that we would really see him back before the end of this year. But where it really hurts is for players like Alex Belzile, who's still a young player who's really looking to carve out a spot on this team, and missing this time due to injury really hurts him, because this isn't just like a normal game for Alex Belzile, because he's an older player, 31 years old. He spent the majority of his career in the AHL. Mm-hmm. So when he finally gets a chance to come to the NHL, and he is playing pretty good and showing some really good skill, even, last game getting promoted higher up, in the lineup due to his effort. This has to be so tough for him. It's like you're working your whole career to get here. You're making a good impression. To get hurt at the end of the season, to join that laundry list of players. And that's what really hurts us in this development year is the injuries, because players that would get a chance to really grow and shine and possibly provide us with new options in the future aren't really getting the chance to really work on their games. Like, imagine if Juraj Slafkovsky had the full year to really play and work on his craft. Like, I think he's still going to be a great player, but, being injured for this amount of time really hurts, your progression. So this is why it's so important that absolutely, Josh, we do need to revamp our athletic therapy and just our general philosophy, just to strengthen conditioning. I think it's going to be a lot of different programs that we're going to need to look at, because this is having a huge impact on our team that these services aren't quite working the best right now for the Montreal Canadiens.
As some people pointed out, if you look at that list of players, a lot of them aren't old. It's not like they're big injury-prone players. People in their first, second, third seasons just getting hurt, season-ending things. Now, as some people have pointed out as well, the Habs in a tanking season are in a much better position to put people, just say, we're going to put you on the IR, you're going to be out for the season. You don't need to play this year, right? There's no real motivation as the Habs started to plummet in the standings. And if they were in a playoff hunt, maybe this list would be shorter, but at the same time, like, the fact that there's so many, and it's not just this year, it was last year too, and even a bit the year before that, the fact that these players are just constantly, no matter who's coming in and from where, they're getting hurt, it's really unnerving. But to talk a bit about Monahan, a guy who maybe we expected to get injured, Jesse, what are your thoughts on bringing him back next year? Because we saw Nick Suzuki had a quote saying, like, the guys love Monahan, he's in high spirits, he's a great talented player, and he hopes that a team can see that value in him. Do you think Montreal could take a flyer on him if the deal is right?
It's an interesting comment, especially that it's coming from Nick Suzuki. And you have to think that Kent Hughes, Jeff Gordon, that they're paying attention to this. Mm-hmm. I think, a big part of running a good organization is just, having consistency and, having your employees, so to speak, being happy, and I think they want to keep their young captain happy in a place where he can really thrive and succeed. And with players that, he wants to play with. But in my opinion, just going back to our previous point about just so many injuries this year is after we've had so many injuries, even though I love Sean Monahan as a player, everybody watching the pod knows I've been singing his praises all year. I think he's a great player. I think he could add a lot to this team, but there's just too much risk at this point. We're just having such a problem with injuries where I think we need to do everything we can, where we need to change things internally, but we also need to look at the players we're bringing in. We need to do everything we can to kind of, shake this problem that we're having with that, including the players that we're signing. So for that reason, unfortunately, I would have to pass on Sean Monahan for next year.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment. It sort of hits morale when these guys go down for injuries. Personally, I think if the price is right, if it's no more than maybe 1.5, 2 mil per year, if he can play even like 40, 50 games, that price tag isn't that bad for the value he brings, but I can totally understand that. And let us know in the comments what you guys think about Monahan, as we're going to kind of transition. As we see all these injuries, we'll stop dwelling on the fact that they're injured, so let's look at the positives. Who could get called up? Who could play for Montreal? And the first guy on everybody's mind who could fill in one of these forward spots is Samuel Montembeault, of course. He says, "Je n'ai jamais vu ça. I've never seen this. This morning at practice, we didn't even have a full lineup. On n'avait même pas un alignement complet. Je suis capable de jouer à l'avant." He says he can play forward. Sam Montembeault says he's available to play forward. Of course, this was said in jest, but it's not that ridiculous at this point, especially with the news that Cayden Primeau is officially starting the Habs next game. Maybe we could see him. But Jesse, on a realistic note, as I show the top scorers for Laval, who do you think might be a top candidate to get called up to fill some of these spots? Of course, Anthony Richard, we've seen him already, but is there anyone else that you think could make this Habs roster?
I think Emil Hanneman. We've been talking recently about how he's just been tearing it up, 6 goals in his last 6 games, still continuing to play strong as well. So I think when we're deciding on which players we want to bring up to end the season, it's, for sure we're not making the playoffs, but we still want to think kind of long-term. Which players are going to be part of our long-term future? So players like Emil Hanneman come to mind. Also players like Jaden Struble as well. So this is a player that I would like to see. We're missing a little of that physicality now with David Savard being out. So there is a point, too, to saying, okay, maybe this is a little bit too earlier in the development. The fact that they're getting just to the AHL and they're leapfrogging. But for me, I feel like you really need to put a premium on our star prospects, those that we really feel has a big future in the NHL. So those are the players I'd like to see at this point in time.
For sure. You do wonder if Laval is going to be like, guys, come on, please, we need some people for the rest. I don't think they're in a playoff spot, but, if you're Laval, if you look back at that list of top scorers, Richard is amazing. Abandonado is playing really well, but a lot of these guys aren't putting up a ton of points, but that's because a lot of their top point getters are in the NHL already. Guys like Guhle and even Barron, who are putting up good points down in the AHL, are up with the Habs. So it'll be interesting. I think Heineman is cool. 6 goals in 6 games for Laval, so shows he has a goal-scoring touch, and the Habs kind of desperately need that, so we'll be keeping an eye on it. But the last thing we want to talk about today, Jesse, just a quick, there's so much negativity around all these injuries, season ending here, terrible thing there. But Cole Caufield, our savior, the guy that is going to bring Montreal, lead them 50-goal seasons to a Stanley Cup final and a Stanley Cup victory in the future. Cole est de retour sur la glace. He's back on the ice at practice, and oh boy, I don't think there's any better sight. Well, maybe there are some, but this is pretty great. I love seeing Cole Caufield back. Seems like he's in good spirits. He's been around the team a lot, Jesse. What do you think about his attitude towards this whole thing? Because it really seems like he is striving to truly be a better player when he comes back than when he got injured.
Absolutely. I've just loved his whole attitude. And it even comes to like the offseason of Nick Suzuki, Cole Caufield sticking around the town. Like you can tell they love being Montreal Canadiens. And with Cole's contract coming up, you got to feel like of all players, he would be somebody to take a team-friendly deal, probably less than Nick Suzuki, just to kind of establish himself as captain, getting that highest pay. I think they want to structure that team accordingly. And if they could do that, I think that this will be just so much better for the Montreal Canadiens' future. So just his overall attitude, just his commitment to the team, staying around at practices, now, being back at the ice, it's so nice to see him in the red, white, and blue again.
Yeah, it's awesome, and I'm sure that extension will be coming not too far from at the end of the season, so that'll be something to keep an eye on. We'll be making a video whenever that happens, and I'm sure if there's any speculation, any news and rumors that comes out about it, but awesome to see him back on the ice, and despite all the other injuries, it's cool to see some people are making some progress. But that'll do it for this edition of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Help us hit 5,000, guys. We'd really, really appreciate it. We love all the support you're giving us, and we hope it continues long into the offseason and well into this Habs rebuild. I'm Josh Gosse for my co-host, Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.